here's where I've come to grips with off seasons. And it's not good for sports talk, what I'm about to say in a little bit of a sense. But I've come to realize that over the years, when you sit here and you get into debates of what you should or shouldn't do, more times than not, you have no clue. Right? If I were to say to you, what are you going to be doing in 20 years? You really don't know. You might have an idea of what you think you might want to do, but you don't have a damn clue in the world. It's why it's the dumbest interview question that I've ever heard in my life when someone asks, what do you want to be doing in the next 10 years? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to get for lunch quite literally in an hour. And you're trying to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing in 10 years? Now, we can sit here and debate on what's the best route, but I've heard and I've read, whatever term you'd like to use, on Twitter the last few days, and by Twitter I guess I mean X, what the Reds should be doing and what the Bengals should be doing. And the reality is, the last few years, this is what we've heard, at least on the Reds side of the house, right? A couple years ago, it was, oh man, what a terrible season we're about to have. I mean, we're going to lose probably every bit of 90-plus games. We have nobody coming up. Next thing you know, I'm like, you know what? Let's do a show every day. Show the people that we're really in it, you know? We'll start at the bottom and work our way all the way up. Turns out we were in the race to possibly win the division at the All-Star break. Yeah. And then we were in the playoff race until he's gone now, but David Bell might have taken out Hunter Green when he was throwing possibly a complete game gem after like 14 or 15 strikeouts that we just so happened to be at. And he got taken out. But my point stands is that they went from being some team that had no chance at all to being quite literally in the playoff hunt all the way until the last day of the season, 2 days of the season, I think. Mm-hmm. Fast forward into the next year. Well, I'll tell you what. There's one thing that you can count on in 2023, though, if it was going to be terrible. What was it? It was the starting pitching. Remember, we had the big three. We had Lodolo, Ashcraft, and Hunter Green, and not a single one of those were worth a piss. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. And in fact, if we would have had a little bit of help from any of them, we might have made the postseason. But instead, we had Ellie who came up, McLean who came up, Steer who came up. We had all these, TJ Friedel had a hell of a year. We had all these players that we were excited about going into the next season because we thought, you know what? The starting pitching can't possibly be that bad. But we got all these young guys coming up. Noelve Marte, Matt McLean, Ellie De La Cruz, TJ Friedel, CES. What happened? We watched the whole season, and half of them weren't worth a piss, and if they were worth a piss, then they were on the disabled list. So I'm done with all of that. I just am. Is Austin Hayes a good signing? It's $5 million. What are we talking about?
Did they even sign him yet?
What?
They haven't even announced it yet.
Well, I'm assuming.
Okay.
I'm assuming. And maybe I shouldn't assume. Maybe I shouldn't assume. Okay? But let's just say, for instance, that does come to bear. I'm hopeful that maybe the physical is the reason why or something else. Who knows? Who knows? And if it doesn't, then okay, I guess we don't have Austin Hayes. I still feel the same way. Whether we have him or we don't, I'm not saying it doesn't matter or it does matter. If we get 2023 Austin Hayes, guess what? We're all going to be like, this is the greatest signing we've ever had. He could also be Will Myers. And I don't know what he's going to be. I'm not going to sit here and suggest I do know. But I do know one thing. It's that I walked in on a conversation that was about franchises making decisions that everyone else in the league had the exact same opportunities to make. And we got ourselves in a position this morning where we have to debate on whether or not we could go get a center fielder perhaps. Now, he's been injury prone, right? That could probably make a pretty big damn difference.
Large difference.
But let's just say money was the real culprit. We can act like maybe perhaps it was because they were asking too much in prospects. But the reports are, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm relatively new to this. The reports are that they wanted us to basically take the entirety of the contract. It was going to be a salary dump, and we were going to have to take that and bear it. You know what happens more times than not at organizations that have the ability to do things like that? They don't give a damn. And that's the real issue that I've come to grips with baseball in general. Now, I'm not going to get on the same soapbox I went on the other day, But when I talk about the inequities that exist, it's that you have to be perfect. The same way the Bengals are going to have to be perfect if they sign T. Higgins to a number 1 type wide receiver role. It's because they've allocated all their funds to one position group and or one unique connection point between a quarterback and a receiver. And we can all agree that that's a very important thing in the NFL. If it's not the most important thing, it's sitting right behind being able to get to the quarterback. And you already have a guy that can get to the quarterback who's under contract, and I get that he might hold out and do all those things, but we did the same song and dance last year, and we seen what happened. The truth is that when you get down to push comes a shove, just like in life, whoever has the most money usually wins because they have the ability to hold out leverage longer than the next guy. So Trey Hendrickson, if we want to sit here and discuss it, I know I'm bouncing around all over the place right now, but if you want to discuss whether or not he's going to hold out or this guy's going to hold out, okay, then just miss game checks. See how that feels. You start losing millions of dollars because you're trying to hold out for the next best thing. Somehow, I'm just assuming they start crawling back.
He might retire, though.
Well, if he retires, that's great. He could retire. And you know what? Some people,
just such a joke.
Some people will have, I don't want to say it's an ego, but they'll have this strong backbone of saying, you know what? I believe money doesn't control me, so I will do something that others won't do just to basically make sure that I'm right or I feel like I get the right end of the stick. Now, whether or not Hendrickson does that, I highly doubt it. But going back to the whole song and dance that we do every single offseason for every sport, am I wrong in saying that at this point, maybe I shouldn't do this as someone that obviously is a part of a Red show and someone that does a show here from time to time? It's terrible sports talk. I get it. It's terrible sports talk. But I'm going to always openly say from now on, I don't know. I don't know. Because every single season, every single person's been wrong about the narrative that they've taken into the following season. The bullpen was going to be bad, remember? Yep. Remember that one? I remember like 2 weeks into the first season when we started doing Chatterbox Reds every single night. The bullpen was the reason this team wasn't going to make the postseason. In fact, you know what? You look back at the end of the year, the bullpen was the best one that they had. It was the best unit of the entire team was the bullpen. Even the big one. Even the big one. The folks that have the biggest radio microphones in the world don't get it right. Right? That's why you want to do the trifecta right now. Let's do it. That's why Wes Miller right now, might be in prime position in this city to be the best coach in the city. Not because he is. Not because he is. Is because I see every single person right now acting as if he's the worst coach in the country. And I'm not going to get into debates of whether or not he is or isn't the best coach. But I would just say, if you watch UC basketball for more than 1 or 2 games, the issue lies in the fact that they don't have talent on the inside. And that's it. That's it. Quite literally it. You get a couple guys that can actually, do their job, rebound, block shots, score the basketball when they're getting the ball passed to them within 3 or 4 feet of the basket.
Would be nice.
That's what you kind of need if you're going to have guys out there who can't guard, like Aziz and Mandega.
Wes said it himself after the Xavier game. You can't make layups. You can't make free throws. You can't make dunks. You should have just stopped there.
Yeah, listen, I understand what you're saying, and it's as we debate all this stuff, it's like nobody really knows what's going to happen, so why do it? But you have to. This is part of the job. You gotta theorize.
It's not that I'm arguing that we shouldn't have conversations about it. It's that when I see people take such strong stances on it, like they 100% are telling you that the sky is blue. Like you shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't be on X or wherever else dunking on people.
Yeah.
Because this was the most intelligent move that they've made all offseason because they brought in Austin Hayes, allegedly, or if they didn't. It's like, let's just sit down, relax, understand it's only $5 million if allegedly that's true. And let's let it play out. I can't believe the discourse that happens, and maybe it's just because it's the internet and it's not a real place at times, but the discourse that happens between the vigor that is T. Higgins, whether or not he should be re-signed, and the vigor that is, well, this isn't enough, the Reds need to do more, or the Reds have had the best offseason in baseball. I can't, am I allowed to be in the middle of all this?
Sure.
Am I allowed to be, what's the guy's name in Hamilton? Aaron Burr, sir?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to be him where you just kind of I'm not trying to play both sides, but I'm just saying I'm not sure anybody's right here.
But honestly, no. You aren't allowed to be in the middle. You have to pick a side, and you have to make it your entire brand and live and die on takes. That's just what being a sports fan is these days. It's miserable, but you have to be right and wrong every single time. You can't just toe the line.
I wish there was a middle ground. But I think it's hard to do that, especially given the fact that there is a need to want to be right more than anything. I know that more than anything. I mean, when the Reds let go of David Bell, I was ready to root against whoever that next new manager was, unless it was Terry Francona.
You said those words.
I said those exact words because I thought it was frustrating that the entirety of last season was being placed on David Bell, similarly to where the UC basketball season kind of is right now with Wes Miller, including myself. I'm blaming Wes Miller. I think that's a little bit different given the fact that I do think there is talent on the roster. I just don't understand how they play this bad. It boggles the mind. And with the Bengals, it's you look at T. Higgins, you look at Trey Hendrickson. What's going to happen? Who do you need more? Do you need T. Higgins? And then it's if you let him go, right? Or if Joe Mixon, we all like Joe Mixon, but then Joe Mixon had to get paid $10 million, and we don't like Joe Mixon anymore. But then this year, it's look what Joe Mixon's doing, and it's all about proving each other wrong to an extent, and unfortunately, that's the way it is. Shout out First Take for starting that.
And listen, I'm not here to suggest that you can't have discourse and debate over what decisions are made and what they're not made. I just find it hard to believe that you still go down the path that is you think that you know something when in reality we have history that has shown that we've done this 2 or 3 years in a row with both of these organizations, and we've been wrong almost every single time. Almost every single time. I was told behind this desk, sitting right there, not too long ago, that Jermaine Burton was going to be the guy that replaces T. Higgins. And here we sit in Jermaine Burton's ripping slot machines at Hollywood Casino, and we're begging T. Higgins to come back. I mean, I'm just saying, maybe we can just all, and I know I seen Fred, I think in the chat said, this guy's telling people to relax.
Fair.
I mean, maybe it's Groundhog's Day, maybe it's not. I don't know. But I have decided for the Reds, I've told you this before, I'll tell you again, have I been pessimistic? I don't know what the right word is. I've been bound in the dumps. I don't know if it's the weather. I haven't been able to go outside in 2 months. I don't know if it's the fact that every time I turned around, the Dodgers were signing what would be our best player. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but probably 5 times this offseason. They signed a guy that would be our best player. And you look at the roster sometimes, and I got to get myself out of the spiral, but I did it the other day just to make myself feel even worse, is that I went to Fangraphs, and I checked out the Dodgers roster, and I thought to myself, if we were on a video game right now, would you be allowed to make a trade 1-for-1 on any player that the Dodgers currently have on the starting pitching staff and or the field? Would they trade any single person position for position? And I think I've come up with the answer is no. Their 5th starter, I don't think, and again, this is where Nick was probably going to hate my guts for saying it, and I hope I'm wrong. This is not me wishing it to be true. But I think that their 5th starter, they wouldn't trade for Hunter Green. I don't think that they would take our ace and replace it with their worst. I don't think they would. I could be wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong. And you know what? The beauty of baseball is that maybe, and this is where I'm trying to convince myself, the beauty of baseball is that if you get into the postseason, it's 1 week of baseball. Who's playing the best at that time? You got a chance to run off some games, and you have a chance to win. That's where my head's at. That's where I got to leave it at. Otherwise, I get down the spiral of psychological warfare with my brain about what this upcoming season is going to be, and it winds up not being good.
So what you're saying is you're all in.
Is that a Xavier pun?
No. It wasn't supposed to be, but now it kind of is.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure if that was a Xavier pun or not, but I am cautiously optimistic, and the reason for, I guess, the cautious part, and it's not just full blown all in, is that the reality is a lot of the things that need to happen we have not seen yet fully, and that's okay. But we can all agree that that's the case.
Sure.
And again, this isn't rocket science, but everyone wants to get up in arms about one single player that they're going to bring in the outfield or this, that, and the other. And I just think I've come to the realization that that's not really what it's going to be about at all. Matt McLain's going to have to be the guy that he was in his rookie season, that was one of the best second basemen in baseball, or I guess you could say infielders, since he moved around a little bit.
Yep.
And I got a name. This is maybe the hot take of the day. This is the guy that I actually think, and this is where you can take it one of two ways. You can get depressed what I'm about to say, or you can say, you know what, there's something to that. The most important player in the infield outside the obvious is Santiago Espinal. And if that makes your heart hurt, I understand. But I also would say he played relatively well down the stretch last year. Maybe if he gets some comfortability of being at a certain place for a certain amount of time, he has had success in the past. He's the only guy that I trust to play defense at third base. And the reality is that they're going to have to rely on him. And if he plays well and above his head, if you want to call it that, and they find TJ Friedel to play every day and Matt McLain plays every day, I do think they could win the Central. I do. But those are dominoes that all have to go together, right? It can't just be two of those three have to happen. I think all three of those have to happen.
We talked about it yesterday, kind of that who has the most pressure on them outside of, Matt and Ellie, the obvious guys. But we talked about Candelario and how everyone's just kind of forgetting about him, begging for that $15 million a year bat and for agency this year. Well, we got one last year. He just happened to stink. So if he can be, half of what we expect him to be this year, that raises the floor of this team pretty drastically too.
Yeah, and it's just so many question marks. Last year tricked us into, or I guess the 2023 season tricked the 2024 season into being something that it wasn't. And it was going to be great, and we had all these young guys, and we were going to make a case for the Central, and we were going to make the playoffs, and you were going to have Ellie and Matt and everybody, and then you slowly learn that, these guys actually have to play baseball, and then they have to stay healthy, and then they've got to be available down the stretch, and they've got to be actually good at baseball. CES last season was one of the worst qualified players in Major League Baseball. Will Benson couldn't swing a bat if his life depended on it. Jamir Candelario, for a large portion of the season, couldn't swing a bat, couldn't walk half the time, couldn't play defense. And now this year, I think the expectations are back, not exactly to where they were before the 2023 season, because that season was supposed to be a lost cause. This is a little bit different. I think the expectations have changed from, this is going to be a bona fide playoff team to they're going to fight. And they're going to be competitive, and we're going to see what we have this year. Because if Matt McLain's hurt again this year, I'm not giving up on him, but that's clearly a guy you can't rely on, right? CES, if he's hurt again, or if he's bad again, that's a guy that I have doubts that we can trust and rely upon heading into 2026. You have a 3 to 4 year window here with Terry Francona and Ellie De La Cruz. You have to make the most of it. And by the way, that might be less because after the 2026 season, when this sport goes to hell, I don't know what anybody's going to be able to do. So really, it's these next 2 seasons. Take as much chances as you can because you have no idea what that other world looks like. And I don't know what it's going to look like if we lose a half season, a full season, 2 seasons. Who knows how long we're going to lose baseball after when the CBA comes crashing down. There's no way of knowing. My expectations this year is a team that's going to fight. And if they're able to fight similarly to the way they did in that 2023 season where the last game of the season mattered, that's all I'm asking for. That's all I can hope for. And to be a pessimist, I am a pessimist. I'm a pessimistic Reds fan. They made the playoffs 4 times in 30 years without advancing. Am I supposed to be happy? Yeah. Like, that's the part of it too, and you can talk about the Bengals and the Bearcats, and there's so many other things here that we've discussed in the past 10 minutes, but it's like you're allowed to have questions, and that's the thing. You don't have to be settled on one exact thing. You don't have to be set on the fact that, Jake Fraley and we're going to have this platoon. Gavin Lux has to be in the infield. Gavin Lux, just roll with it for a little bit and see what happens, because there is, honest to God, no way of knowing where this season's going to take us at this moment.
No, and I also two things that I also want to kind of talk about is Craig Sandlin yesterday put out a thread that I thought was very basically perfectly describes the situation that is the Cincinnati Reds. Phil Castellini comes out and says something shocker that everyone else on X disagrees with, and they want to start yelling, which was the notion that it's Nick Krall's decision of whether or not they're going to re-sign Ellie. That was the nuts and bolts of the way he said it. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that was the gist of it. And the truth is that, whether you like that answer or whether you don't, I think if nothing else, the one thing that we can always rely on Phil Castellini of actually doing for us as a fan base is kind of saying what he is or telling the truth. You might not like what he says, and we might not agree with what he says, but I actually prefer somebody just to straight spit in my face than to smile in my face and turn around and badmouth me the whole way out. I'd rather just know the situation beforehand so I can deal with reality versus always just assuming that things are great when they're not. If that's the decision-making process that is the ownership group, which is, hey, here's your budget. Outside of that, you do whatever you wish with it. We can all agree that Ellie can't be resigned. We can all agree that Nick Krall doesn't really have a decision to be made. As Craig pointed out, if it's Nick Krall's prerogative to spend half the payroll on one player, then I guess he could do that if he'd like. But we all know that that's not reality. You can't do that. If as much as we love Ellie and as much as we think that he's going to be a superstar, whether he will or won't be, and as much as we think how important that could be for the next generation of Reds fans, it doesn't really matter if the budget doesn't allow for it. We can all want to go out and get the shiny Corvette that sits in the parking lot that we go and we all agree that we love it. We think that we want it. But we go look at our finances and we'd rather, be able to eat lunch every day. So then that's the decision that Nick Krall's going to have to make. And he doesn't have a decision, if we're being completely honest, which, again, whether you like it or you don't, that's the reality. So now we know, at least I do, that Ellie isn't going to be re-signed. And I've banged this drum from the very beginning, and everybody scoffed at me, and even the ones that the big microphones used to make fun of the fact that I was talking about, you got to extend Ellie almost last offseason, and if it's not last offseason, it has to be this offseason. The only reason I say that is not because I think Scott Boras wants to do that. Everyone always says, oh, Scott Boras doesn't want to do that. Scott Boras doesn't want to do that. He's never going to let that happen. Okay, the only leverage you have as the Reds is that he's making league minimum before he gets a chance to go to free agency, and you have the ability and or arbitration, and you have the ability to exponentially pay him while he can't make it. So you have an advantage that other teams don't have. Now, again, could the Dodgers or the Mets or the Yankees come in and just easily cover the cost that it was, the few years that the Reds have as an advantage? Probably. It also begs the question at some point is, do you want to play in this town? Which is the part that really sucks. We'll find out whether or not we're capable of signing big stars with the next CBA, and that'll be a decision made that has nothing to do with the Reds as a whole. But the bigger picture question that I have with the Reds is what are they going to do over the next 3 to 4 years that we can all agree that maybe we have a young core that we're underpaying right now? Because if we can't go out and take a salary dump for, if healthy, one of the best center fielders in all of baseball, if we can't do that now, then I guess it begs the question, will we ever be able to do it? Because it also, to Craig's thread, points to a bigger problem that the Reds currently face. This hasn't been said publicly, but it's just me reading the tea leaves. If you don't know what income you have coming in from your highest revenue provider, which is the television contract, it's probably hard to make big executive decisions. And I'm not trying to make excuses for the ownership group. I'm not trying to make excuses for Nick Krall. But we're going to have a collide here soon of collective ideologies within this fan base. If the Reds get near an opportunity to make the postseason at this All-Star break, let's say around the trade deadline, they're already proving right now as we speak that they don't really have a lot of financial flexibility to be able to go out and do something that other teams may be capable of doing, but we don't have that flexibility right now because of whatever reasons you want to say. The truth is that the ownership group probably doesn't have a significant amount of money to spend because the Reds don't bring in a significant amount of money, comparatively speaking, to the top-level teams in Major League Baseball, which is fair. They also don't have so much money sitting in their bank that they just treat it as a hobby and they can just spend whatever they want to spend. So who do they go to next? And this is where I think the rubber meets the road, probably for some. And I think that the question is what do you do with prospects? And that's the scary part. Because now we're in an age-old debate of what do you do if you're a small market? Do you get your chance and go all in and spend a bunch of money for a 2 or 3 year window and then be terrible for 6, 7, 8 years and then try to rebuild it up? Or do you just play the prospect game the entire time and hope that you continue to find good players that you can keep under league minimum for 3 to 4 years, put them in arbitration, trade them when they get close to becoming free agents, repeat, recycle, and hopefully win? The problem with that method is that you have to be so good at it and almost perfect at it that it seems almost unsustainable, right? Everyone always points towards the Tampa Bay Rays as the perfect, basically golden child of being able to do such a thing. And I would ultimately say that that is the best that you could possibly do with what they've been given. But the opposite is also true, which is what the Oakland A's continue to do, is what the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I dare I say, as much as we want to scoff and laugh at the Pittsburgh Pirates, we're not far behind them, if we aren't behind them. Now, that's the pessimistic side of all of it. But I guess I'm leading to a bigger question, which is when your financial situation is in limbo and you get to a chance to make the postseason this year, are they going to pull the trigger and actually trade a bunch of these prospects that we probably maybe should keep? That's the age-old debate. And I don't know if they will or not, but that's coming down the pike relatively soon.
Yeah, I think the answer would be yes if they knew that the Castellinis, say whatever you want about them, they know if they have a good team and that if they did, especially like let's say hypothetically this team is really good this year, they fight, let's say they win 85 games, somehow miss the playoffs, I don't know, something like that to where they know they can go all in next year, they're going to go all in next year. And that might not mean spending on a ton of free agents, but it will mean trading prospects, and I do think they would do that. And I'd argue that, you know, with as young of a core and as young of a lineup as we have right now, where are the other young guys going to play once they're ready? Like, where is Arroyo playing? When would Arroyo get here and when would he play? I don't know. So if my options are Arroyo, I don't see him for 2 more years because, quite frankly, he doesn't have a spot in the infield. Or you have Luis Robert, who I can get right now in right field, whether or not he plays 150 games, you're betting on that, but you're also betting on, I made the point earlier, you're betting on every single other player to be healthy too, so why not bet on Robert? You know, I would say that they would. I think the Reds know what they've got. They know they can't, you know, bring up every single prospect, not to mention even if they do become the prospect that you hope that they are, then you know you can't pay them. So it's like, I don't think they're afraid to trade prospects. I think they're afraid to go all in before it's too early. Because I think they've made that mistake before. And they don't want to make it again, especially right now with this entire sport in limbo.
I don't think they're afraid to trade prospects either. I think they're afraid to miss. Because if you're the Reds and you trade prospects for a big guy and he's not good, then you have nothing. And you're not going to be able to go get big guys in free agency. And then you have no prospects left to move. And you're just spinning your tires for, 3-4 years if you miss on that? So if you're going to trade a package like we're talking about for Luis Robert, which was Chase Petty and Edwin Arroyo, which is what was reported, that's a lot for a guy with injury concerns. And I know the money is a different talking point, but if the Reds are held up on moving those 2 guys for an injury-riddled center fielder, I think I'm okay with that being a reservation if they aren't willing to eat some money. It's moving a lot for the Reds farm system, but then again, again, when you get to the All-Star break, if you are in contention, you got to go in at some point. The last 2 years, I've said it wasn't the right time. I've been on the side of keeping the prospects, and not really last year wasn't as much of a talking point as the year before when they were leading the Central, but it just felt like such a risk with all those guys in their first year. Now you have to know what you have. You have to at least have a thought process about believing in what you have and what they can get to, and then fill the holes that you recognize around that. If the Reds don't ever compete or show that they're going to compete with Ellie for these 3 or 4 years, why would he resign? Not even money-wise. Why would he come back to Cincinnati if you can't win with him on a minimum deal? What makes you think you can win with him paying him $500 million? Why would he think that? So if he loves Cincinnati to death and you show him for 4 years that you can't win putting things around him or having the opportunity to put things around him, then I think that just continues to decrease the small amount of bargaining chips we have in terms of negotiations.
And I also think Ellie's going to be the main topic of conversation in this town for quite some time until he either decides to move on and or re-sign with the Reds, and that's rightfully so because of who he is and what he has a capability of being. But I also don't, as an organization, want to get so invested into one single player that you lose sight of what the overall goal is, which is the only real reason that us fans actually care, and that's winning, right? Like, I just look at what and again, not to jump around from sports, but I look at all the winning franchises that have had success over the past, call it 10, 15 years, and those fan bases certainly love players, without question. But they don't care if someone gets traded away and then all of a sudden the team still has success. Where we care, or where they would care as well, is if you do make trades or you do give away pieces that are valuable and you still don't win. And that's where I think you bring a valid point, which is I would turn that on its head, though, and say, if you're the Reds franchise, the only real fastball you have or pitch that other franchises might not have is your ability to, quite frankly, out-scout and out-draft and outsmart other franchises. It's the only way you get ahead.
It's how we got Gavin Lux.
It's the only way you get ahead. And I would just say, if you are always worried about trading a prospect or two, then what is your confidence level in being able to replenish the system as a whole?
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
If I have one golden goose, then yeah, I'm probably going to always be scared to give that up. But if I feel like I have 10 and someone's offering me an opportunity to have success immediately right now, yes, I might be selective on which one I give away, but the reality is I'm okay with giving away almost any of them. Because I guess my point is if we're going to look at this thing as a franchise right now, that Ellie's expendable in a way, that's what we're doing. Like, if we're not making it a priority to clearly make Ellie a part of the future, if Ellie's expendable, or if, let's just say, Ellie's not capable of being re-signed, then I think it points to a bigger picture, which is true in Major League Baseball. The Angels has proven this. One player, no matter how good they are, isn't going to help a team get over the hump or not. This isn't basketball, and this isn't football. Clearly, the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, if you take Patrick Mahomes away from the Chiefs, they probably don't have nearly the same amount of success. I would say in basketball, you could take a 15-year stretch with LeBron James, and if you took LeBron James off the team, they aren't going to the NBA Finals like they were. So, if your league's in a situation where Mike Trout has played for a team for as long as he played for them and put up the numbers that he did during that same stretch, and they still continually miss the postseason, might I remind you, at one time they had Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout and missed the postseason, then it leads you to believe that one player isn't the end-all, be-all. So I ask the question is are we going to treat Ellie's next 3 to 4 years like there's zero chance to win without him? And if the answer is yes, that's fine, because at some point we have to win, is where I'm at. And I think as a fan base, we've gotten ourselves where we cannibalize each other, and I understand why. But it's like, I was thinking of the analogy the other day, and maybe this was a terrible thought, but I was thinking, like, there's times where you see a dog in the alley, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, they're clearly malnourished. They're clearly astray. They're clearly, not probably had a whole lot of love in their life. If you were to walk up to that dog and they were either to attack you and or run away or scoff at the idea of you wanting to pet them, we as humans would understand that, Like, we would be like, all right, There's a real reason as to why they're acting the way they're acting. But somehow, as fans of the Reds, whenever we see somebody being a little pessimistic or just not excited because of this or that, why do we jump on their case and think to ourselves like, you're always going to be like that. You can't get excited for Austin Hayes. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. I'm just saying openly that I can't be dismissive of what the folks that have endured the last 30 years have endured to be the way that they are. They're conditioned to be like that.
Yeah.
If you're a Chiefs fan that's 27 years old, whether they win the Super Bowl or not, in the offseason, they probably don't care what the Chiefs do. They could care less. And their expectation is the next time that the ball gets rolled out on the field is that the Chiefs are going to win another Super Bowl because they've been conditioned to be that way. So I'm just saying, as Reds fans, I get the idea of always being tired of hearing people being pessimistic about everything. Certainly, I get that. And I don't know why maybe you'd want to live your life that way. And you could ask the question of, why are they like this? But when you ask that question, I always come back to the same thing I just mentioned. They've been conditioned to be like that. And the problem always lies in sports is that you always want to point a finger at who's the problem child. And the reality is with the Reds, I don't want to point to Nick Krall and say he's the reason why. He's not been around long enough. You could say it's the Castellini's fault, but you know what? I'll also be honest with you. I think that there's a problem within Major League Baseball that makes it almost nearly impossible for them to do what we all want every offseason. And yes, you can sit here and tell me that they could find a way. They have the money. They're millionaires. Again, you can go out and you can buy that Corvette today too. You might not be able to feed your family when you buy it, but you can buy it. You 100% could buy it. You got just enough money to go get it. And sometimes I feel like that's what we're asking our ownership group to do, is to go out and buy the Corvette. Yeah, you might lose all your net worth. The last 50 years of building the business that you've been successful with, sell it. Just so we can try to have some winning season in Cincinnati. And I'll also say, if that's you who's asking for that, I understand why. Because you just want the same thing we all want, which is a winning team.
I saw this debate. Would you trade Elly De La Cruz for a World Series?
For a World Series?
Yeah.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
Zero question about it. I'd trade Joe Burrow for a Super Bowl. Like, championships don't happen in this city.
That's what
I'll do whatever it takes to get one.
Now, let's take it back a notch. Would you trade Elly De La Cruz for a playoff run?
No.
Yeah, neither would I.
How deep's that run? Are you winning a pennant?
You are competing. You're competing for the pennant.
No. If you're in that series, you got a chance.
My point being,
are you guaranteeing a loss in that series, or you're there?
I'm guaranteeing you that you're there.
That you're there. That's a decent debate.
Yeah, I think.
My point being is that like there's no real reason why you shouldn't be, or why you shouldn't have that realization to have the moment to be all in. At some point you have to have it.
Yeah.
At some point you have to be all in. And the Austin Hayes signing's great. You know, the Taylor Rogers signing's great.
Right.
All these signings are great, but they're still not up to that point where we're competing for a World Series. We're not there yet. There's going to be a moment, and unfortunately for the small market teams, whether or not you pay Elly De La Cruz, and Jacob's right too, it's where if you pay $500 million to Elly, what's that going to do for the franchise going forward? And it's probably not a whole lot, to be quite honest. Joey Votto, that everybody still talks about how bad that contract is.
If only he would have asked.
Yeah,
the ownership to get him.
Yeah, if they would have, if he
TikToks.
stopped doing TikToks. Yeah, Joey Votto was a Hall of Fame baseball player. He was as good of a baseball player as
outperformed his contract
as you could possibly be in this sport. What did it get him? It got him nothing, and it got the Reds nothing. It got the Reds nowhere. I'm not saying they shouldn't have signed the deal because they should have. The Reds made a decision to sign and extend a Hall of Fame baseball player. They made the right move. I'm just saying that all this stuff. The signing Elly, the not signing Elly, the making these trades. Can you pay enough money for Robert? All of this is just like it's small market talk to a point where there has to be a moment to go all in. And if there's not that moment, I'm concerned that we'll never have it. And if we never have it, like Jacob and Trace were just talking about it, if we're too afraid to pay Robert now, there isn't going to be that moment. There has to be a moment. I'm going to hope that it's next year, the year right before the CBA. We're going to see what we have this year. After this one, the 2026 seasons are all in year. And if it's not, then I'm wrong, then that's fine. But, there comes a point to where it's not sustainable to just go half in. And that's kind of what they're doing now. I'm not blaming them for it necessarily because of the way the sport is. You can't compete with $800 million to Juan Soto. You can't do it. So if you're going to do it this way and you're going to try to bring up prospects and you're going to try to play the long game, I hope it works, but just know that it's probably not the end all. The Rays, everybody points at the Rays. The Rays have had continued success. They haven't won anything, right? The Guardians, they've had continued success. They bring up all these guys that they haven't won anything. Would I like to compete?
To be fair, they've been right there. Though.
Sure,
they've been right there, and I get the argument that you're making. They didn't do it, right? The one thing that we all hope that happens is they get it done and they do it. They win the World Series.
Yeah.
I think it's a little disingenuous on both sides of the aisle. It's very similar to modern day politics. Is that it's like you could say that the Guardians and the Rays didn't do it. And you're right, they didn't win a World Series. But they got there, and they were damn close. And one play here, and a play there, or a hit here, and a hit there. And they did do it. Yeah. So my point is like, does that justify the fact of what the way that they go? Just because they don't give up, let's say that there wasn't a rain delay in Cleveland. Are we going to justify that everything they did over the course of 3 years is worth it or not worth it off of over 2 innings of baseball? Of course we wouldn't do that. But I also agree with what you're saying is the only way to win, I think we can all agree now, looking at this as a holistic view, is the only way to win is what Nick has said, Kirby, of course, is like you have to have prospects. You only win if you have 5 or 6, 7 legitimate big league players that are under team control. And the bigger question ultimately is like, what's the realistic expectation of having that? And it seems like it's very rare. It's going to be very rare for that to happen. But more importantly, this is a crazy thought, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracist or somebody that wants to rig the system. But if I was a small ownership group, I'd be forming allies. And I'm not even kidding when I say this. I know people think that this might be a joke. I'd be forming allies, man. I would be trying to find 3 to 4 other like-minded ownership groups that want to win, yes, but they also understand that this thing's rigged against us. And the truth is that if we have a chance, if there's a legitimate chance, I'm calling 3 to 4 ownership groups and I'm saying, I need some help. I'm going to give you a couple prospects, but I'm going to need to get a favor from you. And we're going to have a couple of these guys come over. And listen, the truth is that
collusion.
Would an A's, Reds, Rockies super team even do anything though?
It gives it. You can say whatever you want, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that it seemed like the Oakland A's for a short time were giving all their players to the Braves,
they did
and I mean, the Braves don't need help, but somehow they were just handing over unbelievable players.
Brent Rooker's going to be a Brave at the deadline.
It's like, what are we doing? So I guess, yeah, I am asking for conspiracies, and if that's wrong, then I guess I'm just wrong for wanting to win.
We deserve a win in this city. Nobody deserves a win more than this city does, so maybe Minnesota.
Right. In the most depressing conversation point of the week, is our best chance at long-term success in Cincinnati a year-long holdout and small market teams changing the way contracts are done in 26 or after 26?
Yes, but I mean, I still think the Dodgers are going to walk out skating on, on ice.
Joe Kelly actually talked about this on a podcast the other day. He said that everyone's trying to fix the Dodger situation with a salary cap and a floor. And he said that if everyone's able to offer you, he said $10, but if everyone's able to offer you $10, everyone's going to go pick to live in LA over Cincinnati or Minnesota or anything anyway. But obviously the other side of that is you can't.
Exactly. There's I mean,
so
with all due respect,
no sense.
With all due respect, listen, the people, and I don't want to go down this warpath today because you know what it turns into? It turns into like
20 minutes.
Well, I'm just saying, what it looks like is it turns into Trace always complaining about Major League Baseball and why it's unfair and that's why the Reds can't win, and you have this pity party all the time. Let me tell you something. And I know Tito Francona feels this way, and I respect that out of him. But if I'm Phil Castellini or I'm in the ownership group or I'm in the baseball operations side of the Reds, I don't have this mentality. I wouldn't. I'm like my competitive spirit wouldn't allow me to be the things that I'm getting ready to explain. To be very clear, right? I wouldn't make excuses. There would be no excuses. You find a way to win regardless. But having said that, if I'm not in that room and I'm sitting outside of it, the truth is that the reason that most people are invested in the NFL the way they are is, yes, the sport is what it is. But they have every team's fan base believing that they are a move or two away, that they're capable of doing from being in contention for the Super Bowl. And you can laugh and scoff at that all you want and say, well, look at the winners. Look at the winners, the Patriots and the Chiefs. Okay, I get it. There has been one or two teams that have been dominant. But as far as teams that have fluctuated throughout the system that have allowed themselves a chance to try to beat the Chiefs or try to beat the Patriots is the point.
Yeah.
We would not be sitting here pessimistic as Reds fans if we made the postseason half the time. And yeah, we might not have won the World Series, but do you remember us getting to the World Series? As Bengal fans, you can say that. Do you remember us getting to the NL championship and losing in Game 7? That's what the Bengals did just a few years ago. Like, those experiences as a fan spur you on. Yeah. They give you life. The only thing that spurs on this fan base is hope and optimism of young, good players playing. Not winning, just playing well.
Yeah.
Just playing well. We won 80 games, 81 games. What was it, 81 games? I don't want to misspeak. Maybe it was 82 games. And we were excited, not because we made the postseason. We were excited because we had a couple young players that played really well that we thought, you know what, we can build upon this. They don't do that in the NFL. You guys missed the playoffs. The Bengals missed the playoffs by a game. And what was it? It was a failure. It was a failure. If that happens for the Reds this season, we will be jumping for joy heading into the next opening day. We'll be sad that they didn't make the postseason, yes, but I can promise you when you come around to February and March, we would be excited about the previous season. So this whole notion that the parity isn't a real thing or the salary cap and salary floor isn't a real thing. The reason Patrick Mahomes plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, is because he has a salary cap. If they didn't, I got news for you. The New York Jets or the Chargers or somebody in some big city that has a significant amount of money would have him.
Yeah.
They would have him. And guess what else they'd have? They'd have Jamar Chase, they'd have Joe Burrow, they'd have all the top players. And then that league, got news for you, that league would be worthless.
Yeah.
And you can say whatever you want about whether you think that that's fair or unfair. I'm not here to debate that. I'm here to just to say, from an entertainment purpose, if you're going to argue that all they need is a salary floor, I'm not trying to call you an idiot. I'm just going to be honest with you. Salary floor, what the hell does that do for us? What does it do? Oh, so the Reds had to spend $200 million. Oh, the Dodgers spend $1 billion. How's that going to fix anything? So Stuart Fairchild makes a little bit more money. That's great.
We can feel a little bit better.
That's fantastic. I'm so thankful for that. The people that are going to take the biggest hit if there was a salary cap, newsflash, is only about probably 5 to 10% of the entire MLB. And that is the superstars. Shohei Ohtani probably doesn't make $1 billion. He'll have to settle for $550 million in this lifetime.
Oh, man.
Tough. I know.
Offset to 2090.
It's just like, and again, if that makes me a bad person because I'm sitting here and I'm arguing against the players getting paid, I'm not arguing that. Hell, if you want to take, let's make it fair. If you want to take the overall revenue from the league as a whole, and you want to say this is how much players were paid, right? Let's project it into 2020, 2030. I don't care. Project the total overall salaries to 2030 of how much Major League Baseball would spend and put that in a pool, split it up with all the teams. So you're still, as a league, spending the same amount of money. It's just that the same 4 teams aren't spending all of it. That fixes the problem. And if it doesn't fix the problem, if you don't think it fixes the problem, then I guess we'll never agree. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree. But that's the reality of Major League Baseball. Until then, I guess I'll be a pessimist about the whole thing.
I think that's kind of a pretty big shift this offseason. Obviously, small market teams have been putting up a fight for a while now, but it seems like just like the general population of the world is recognizing a major problem in Major League Baseball. We talked about it earlier this week. Maybe it was last week. All the days run together. But When has there been this big of a national, this is a problem with the sports league? I can't remember it.
Everyone always talks about the Dodgers being the problem. Sometimes I see, the Dodgers, I hate them for this. Oh, what did they do wrong? They did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong. All they did was want to win, and they had the resources to try to make that happen. If you want to be upset at the system, look at the system. Like, they're playing by the rules. And the Dodgers, if anything, and I tweeted it in jest, yes, I know, but it's like, if the Dodgers they're probably like, again, this is a joke, I don't want people to take they're like 1 or 2 more moves away from maybe fixing baseball.
Yeah.
I mean, if they would have gotten Juan Soto, at what point's enough? That's what's happened this offseason. If we're being honest, that's what happened this offseason. We've had enough. We've had enough. Small market fans that have and again, I'm not trying to be this. When I say these things, I don't mean them to be derogatory. But small market fans that have a rational brain have come to the realization that this whole thing has no chance of being successful more times than not, based off the way that it's constructed.
You have to get lucky.
And you have to get a little lucky. And yeah, you could sit here and say that if you do everything perfect, you go out and you get an international superstar and you find him, I don't know, you get lucky and you find a kid that's maybe one of the best players in the world and you only got to pay him $50,000 as a signing bonus. And, maybe they rise up the ranks and next thing you know, they become like they're one of the most exciting players in Major League Baseball, and you can get him and you can get this guy and that guy and they all come up together. That's the other thing. They can't come up in spurts. They got to all come up together. Then maybe you can compete with the team that just decides they're just going to be able to spend money. And that's the reality of what we sit in as Major League Baseball fans as a whole. And that's a pretty negative outlook on it all. I get it. But until it gets fixed, that's how I'm going to feel. I can't lie to people. I can't do it. I have no way to sit up here and tell you how I am extremely excited about the way that baseball is going. Because I don't feel that way. It doesn't mean that when opening day happens and I get on and I get on Chatterbox Reds that I'm not going to be thrilled to death to be watching the Reds. Right? I still am excited for the season. But I just am frustrated by the way in which we all complain about things that seem unrealistic. We're either complaining about the Dodgers, it's not going to do anything. Or we're complaining about the Reds because they don't go out and spend. And it's like, I hate to say this, but that's not the real problem.